August 1944. A P-47 Thunderbolt screams out of a dive at 400 miles per hour, its wings shuddering under the strain. German flak erupts from the ground below, tracers, bright and vicious, stitching across the fuselage. One burst catches the right wing, then another, and another. 12 direct impacts in 7 seconds. The fabric tears, metal dents, aluminum crumples like paper, but the wing holds. It bends. It flexes. It takes punishment that should have torn it clean off. The pilot banks hard, limps toward home on smoking engines, and lands gear down in a field outside of Oxford with half his hydraulic system shot to pieces. When the ground crew swarms the wreckage, they find something impossible. The wing is shattered. It looks like it should never fly again. But the internal structure, the bones of it, is intact. Unbroken. The man who designed that structure is standing at the edge of the airfield, watching. His name is Thomas Brennan. He's 26 years old. 6 months ago, they laughed at him. 3 months ago, they forbade him from testing his idea. Yesterday, his wings saved a pilot's life. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Today, everything changes. RAF Boxstead sits 30 miles northeast of London, tucked into the Essex countryside, where rolling green fields meet concrete and steel. In August 1944, the station is alive with the grinding machinery of air war. Merlin engines turning over in the pre-dawn dark. The sharp metallic clang of ammunition being loaded into 8.50 caliber machine guns. The smell of high-octane fuel mixing with burnt rubber and machine oil. Everywhere, the sound of things being prepared for destruction and, if lucky, survival. The P-47 Thunderbolt is not the most elegant fighter of the European war. It is not the fastest. The Spitfire is faster. The Mustang is more maneuverable. But the P-47 is built like a tank. Thick armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, a powerful Pratt and Whitney engine that can take punishment and keep running. American pilots flying the P-47 do not turn. They do not dogfight. They use the Thunderbolt's weight and power to dive, hit, zoom away, and return to altitude. Boom and zoom. Hit and run. It is a tactic born of necessity and physics. The P-47 cannot turn with a Messerschmitt 109 or a Focke-Wulf 190. But it can dive faster, climb faster when diving from height. And its wings, its heavily loaded, ammunition-carrying, hard-working wings, are engineered to handle the stresses of repeated high-speed maneuvers. Or they are supposed to be. The 356th Fighter Group flies from Boxstead. They fly dive bombing and strafing missions in support of the ground advance into France. They strafe airfields. They bomb rail yards. They rake German positions with machine gun fire from 50 feet above the ground. The work is brutal. The losses are steady. And over the past 3 months, pilots have been returning with damage patterns that do not match flak damage. Dents in the wings that appear after high-speed pulls. Cracks in the wing root after aggressive maneuvers. Minor damage, documented, analyzed, and filed away. But not forgotten. In the engineering hangar, where propellers are balanced and engines are overhauled, one man has been watching these patterns with the intensity of a surgeon studying an X-ray. His name is Thomas Brennan. He is a lieutenant, but not a pilot. He is an aircraft engineer, designer, theorist, the man who reads blueprints the way other men read novels. He has been assigned to the 356th as a technical specialist, responsible for analyzing aircraft performance and identifying maintenance issues. What he has found is something no one wants to hear. Thomas Brennan was born in 1918 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His father was a structural engineer, the kind of man who designed bridges, buildings, the frameworks that held cities together. His mother was a schoolteacher. They were not wealthy, but they were educated. Brennan's father filled the house with technical journals and engineering textbooks. He believed that understanding how things worked, truly understanding, not just memorizing, was the highest form of knowledge. By age 12, Brennan could calculate load paths and stress distributions. By 16, he was sketching his own bridge designs, filling notebooks with detailed drawings and calculations. He attended Carnegie Institute of Technology, where he studied aeronautical engineering. He was not the brightest student. There were several smarter than him, but he was the most persistent. He would spend hours in the lab, testing materials, calculating stress tolerances, sketching and resketching designs until they matched his calculations perfectly. After graduation in 1940, he was recruited by Douglas Aircraft, where he worked on stress analysis for the new P-47 airframe being developed. The P-47 was a revolutionary design, a heavy fighter built around a powerful engine, its fuselage packed with armor and self-sealing tanks. The wing design was solid, proven, tested in wind tunnels and on actual flights. But Brennan noticed something that others had missed. The wing was designed for the expected combat profile: high-speed dives, steep turns, momentary high G-pulls. But the actual combat profile, as reported by pilots returning from Europe, was different, more violent, more sustained. The dives lasted longer. The turns were tighter. The G-forces spiked higher and held longer than the design assumptions predicted. The wing was being used harder than it was designed to handle. In 1943, Brennan submitted a proposal to Douglas: reinforce the wing structure with internal cross-bracing and thicker leading-edge skin. The modification would cost weight, about 90 pounds per aircraft. It would reduce internal fuel capacity slightly. It would not increase speed, but it would make the wing structurally capable of handling the stresses that combat was actually imposing on it. The proposal was rejected. The weight penalty was unacceptable. The fuel capacity reduction was operationally unviable. The design was proven. Leave it alone. Brennan accepted the decision and moved on. In 1944, the Army Air Forces assigned him to RAF Boxstead as a technical liaison, helping coordinate maintenance and performance analysis for the 356th Fighter Group's P-47s. It was a desk job: file reports, analyze data, coordinate with mechanics, and watch pilots die in ways that the design assumptions said should not be possible. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. In the first 3 months at Boxstead, Brennan documented 7 P-47s with structural damage to the wings that could not be explained by flak or cannon fire. The damage appeared after hard maneuvers, high-speed turns, sustained pulls, aggressive dive recoveries. In one case, a pilot returned reporting that his right wing had vibrated violently during a hard left turn. The inspection revealed microfractures in the wing spar, invisible without detailed examination. The damage pattern matched stress failure, not battle damage. Brennan began collecting data obsessively. He measured every damaged wing. He photographed the cracks. He cross-referenced the damage locations with the pilot reports of what maneuvers preceded the damage. A pattern emerged. The damage always started at specific stress concentration points: the wing root, the ammunition box attachment points, the fuel tank mounting brackets. These were the locations where Brennan's calculations had predicted failure would occur under sustained combat stress. He wrote a report. It was 12 pages, dense with calculations and photographs and technical analysis. He submitted it to his commanding officer, Colonel James Tipton. Tipton read it, commended Brennan for his diligence, and filed it away. The P-47 was proven. Thousands were in service. The design was not going to be changed based on the observations of a junior engineer at one airfield. Besides, the damage he was documenting was minor. Operational losses from structural failure were negligible. The real losses came from enemy action and pilot error. Brennan accepted this and said nothing more. But he kept collecting data. By July 1944, he had documented 15 cases of stress-related wing damage. 15 separate incidents where pilots returned with damage that matched his failure predictions. And in 2 cases, he had documented what should have been catastrophic failures: cracks in the main spar that had not resulted in wing separation only because the damage had been detected and the aircraft grounded before the next flight. He understood what this meant. The next time that damage pattern emerged in combat, the wing would fail. The aircraft would break apart in the sky. The pilot would die. So he stopped waiting for permission. The P-47 Thunderbolt is a machine of paradoxes. It is heavy, 14,000 pounds fully loaded, the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war. This makes it slow to accelerate and sluggish in the turn. But it is also fast. It can exceed 400 miles per hour in level flight. And in a dive, it can reach speeds that would tear apart lighter aircraft. This speed is bought with weight and power. The engine is a Pratt & Whitney R2800, producing nearly 2,500 horsepower, a mechanical animal that howls when pushed hard. The wing carries ammunition, 2,600 rounds across 8.50 caliber machine guns. The wing carries fuel, internal tanks that give the P-47 a range no other American fighter could match. The wing carries bombs, 500-pounders slung under each wing, converting the fighter into a fighter bomber. The wing must support all this weight while being maneuvered at speeds that generate enormous aerodynamic forces. When a pilot pulls back on the stick in a hard turn, the wing experiences forces many times greater than gravity. At 400 miles per hour in a 5G turn, the wing loads multiply. The aluminum is stressed past its yield point, bending but not breaking, yet bending repeatedly, cycle after cycle, mission after mission. Metal fatigues. Micro cracks initiate at stress concentration points. Over time, these cracks propagate. They grow with each flight, each maneuver, each turn that exceeds the design assumptions. The P-47 was designed when air combat was slower, less violent, more predictable. The wing was stressed for dives to 400 miles per hour. But pilots in Europe were diving faster, 420, 440 miles per hour, pushing the engine to its limits. The wing was stressed for sustained 4G turns. But combat generated 5G, 6G turns that lasted longer than design assumptions predicted. The wing was stressed for specific stress cycles. But actual combat generated random, unpredictable stress patterns, violent maneuvers, sudden pulls, aggressive reversals that did not match the standard load cases. The design was becoming obsolete under the pressure of real war. Brennan understood this because he had studied the mathematics of stress and fatigue. He knew that metal does not break randomly. It breaks predictably. Fractures initiate at stress concentrations. They propagate along predictable paths. If you understand the forces and the geometry, you can predict where failure will occur. You can predict when it will occur. You can calculate the time to failure within a margin of error. What he calculated was terrifying. Based on the damage patterns he was observing, a P-47 operating under current combat conditions would experience critical wing spar failure within 150 to 200 flight hours. The 356 fighter group was flying pilots to or beyond those fatigue limits. Some of them would lose their wings in combat. Not all, not even most, but some. And those pilots would die. The solution was equally clear to Brennan. Reinforce the wing. Add internal bracing to distribute loads more evenly. Thicken the leading edge to increase fatigue resistance. Upgrade the stress concentration points with better materials and improved design. The modification he had proposed at Douglas 2 years earlier was the answer. It was not glamorous. It would not increase speed, but it would save lives. In July 1944, he proposed the modification to Colonel Tipton again. This time he included detailed failure analysis, photographs of the damage he had documented, and calculations showing the expected fatigue life of the current wing under combat stress. Tipton listened. He was a good officer, not dismissive of technical input. But he was also practical. The P-47s at Boxstead were operational aircraft, not test vehicles. Any modification required approval from 8th Air Force Headquarters. Any modification that reduced fuel capacity or added weight would be controversial. Any modification that suggested the current design was inadequate would be politically difficult. Tipton told Brennan that his analysis was impressive, but that modifying operational aircraft mid-war was not feasible. If there was a design problem, it would be addressed at the factory level. New aircraft would incorporate improved wing designs. But the current fleet would continue to operate as designed. Brennan accepted this answer. He had no choice. He was a junior officer. Tipton was his commander. The chain of command was not a suggestion, but he continued to document the damage. And he continued to calculate. And in August, when a particularly aggressive pilot named Captain Henry Marsh began reporting increasingly severe control flutter at high speed, Brennan knew what was coming. Marsh was 25 years old, from Nebraska, a pilot who had flown 37 combat sorties. He was aggressive, skilled, the kind of pilot who pushed aircraft to their limits because he understood that pushing limits was sometimes necessary for survival. In his last 3 flights, Marsh had reported vibration in the right wing during hard left turns. The vibration was occurring at specific speeds, around 380 miles per hour, and disappeared when he reduced speed or leveled the wings. Brennan knew exactly what this meant. The wing was beginning to flutter. Not flutter in the traditional sense, full aircraft oscillation from aerodynamic instability, but local flutter in the control surfaces, the aileron and wing skin beginning to oscillate due to aerodynamic forces exceeding the structural stiffness of the damaged wing. Marsh's wing had internal damage, the microfractures accumulating, reducing the effective stiffness of the structure. Aerodynamic forces were now exceeding what the weakened wing could resist. Brennan went to Marsh directly. He told him to request a full structural inspection before his next flight. He explained that he was concerned about potential wing damage that might not be visible in routine maintenance checks. Marsh listened, but he was scheduled to fly a strafing mission the next morning. He said he would request the inspection after that mission. Brennan stood in the hangar at 4 a.m, watching Marsh's P-47 being towed to the flight line. He watched the pilot climb in. He watched the engine start, the propeller turning, the aircraft rolling toward the runway. He wanted to run out onto the tarmac and grab the wing strut, physically prevent the takeoff. But that was not how the military worked. That was not how anything worked. He watched the aircraft climb away into the darkness. 3 hours later, Marsh returned. He landed hard, reported control problems, and climbed out looking shaken. The inspection revealed exactly what Brennan had predicted. The right wing spar had a 3-inch crack running perpendicular to the grain of the aluminum. Another flight like that, another hard maneuver at high speed, and the crack would propagate. The wing would fail. Marsh would die. The aircraft was grounded. Marsh was stood down from flying. The wing was tagged for replacement. And Brennan made a decision. That night, Brennan did not sleep. He sat in his quarters with a stack of engineering paper and a pencil, sketching. He was not designing a modification to be approved through channels. He was not writing a report that would be filed away. He was designing a solution to be built in secret, tested in shadow, and proven or disproven by combat itself. The modification would consist of 3 primary elements. First, internal cross-bracing in the main wing structure, using small-diameter aluminum tubing to redistribute loads and reduce stress concentrations. The bracing would follow the load paths Brennan had calculated, creating a structure that was stiffer, more resistant to fatigue, capable of handling the stress cycles that actual combat imposed. Second, reinforced leading-edge skin. The leading edge is where the wing meets the air, where aerodynamic forces are highest. Brennan would use slightly thicker aluminum in this region, increasing the stiffness and fatigue resistance at the point where stress concentration was highest. This would add maybe 30 pounds per wing. Third, upgraded attachment points. The ammunition boxes, fuel tank brackets, and control surface hinges were stress concentration points. Brennan would reinforce these with gusseted brackets and improved fastening, distributing loads more evenly instead of concentrating them at single points. Total weight addition, approximately 85 pounds per aircraft. Total penalty, a reduction in fuel capacity of about 15 gallons per wing, a loss of roughly 5% of total range. Total gain, a structurally capable wing that could handle actual combat stress without fatigue failure. The problem was that Brennan could not simply order the materials and begin work. Any large requisition would be noted. Any modification to an operational aircraft would require paperwork. Any deviation from standard maintenance procedures would be logged and reviewed. So he did what Frank Walters had done, what Eric Callaway had done. He worked in shadow. He began by acquiring materials. Aluminum tubing could be scavenged from damaged aircraft in the salvage yard. Aluminum sheet stock existed in the maintenance inventory. Fasteners could be requisitioned in small quantities under the guise of routine repairs. Over the course of 2 weeks, he accumulated the materials he needed, hiding them in a corner of the engineering storage area beneath tarps and spare parts. He began sketching detailed drawings, not formal engineering drawings, but detailed sketches that showed exactly where each piece would go, how it would be attached, what the loads would be. He cross-checked every calculation. He verified every dimension. The work would have to be perfect. There would be no second chances. If the modification failed in combat, the pilot would die, and Brennan would be responsible. He selected a target aircraft, P-47D Bureau number 42 to 27,519, tail number Mary's Revenge, flown by Captain Henry Marsh. Marsh was aggressive, skilled, the kind of pilot who would push the modification to its limits. Marsh was also the man who had reported the flutter, whose aircraft had shown the critical wing damage. If the modification saved anyone, it would be Marsh. But he did not tell Marsh. He could not. If Marsh knew that his aircraft had been modified without authorization, Marsh would be obligated to report it. The modification would be removed. Brennan would be disciplined, and pilots would continue to fly in structurally compromised aircraft. So Brennan decided to work alone, at night, in secrecy. In the second week of August, after the evening mission debriefing was complete and the day shift mechanics had left the hangar, Brennan returned to the flight line. He had a key to the engineering area. He had access to all the aircraft. He moved quietly, deliberately, with the focus of a surgeon preparing for an operation. He began with the right wing of Mary's Revenge. He carefully removed the fuel tank access panels. He unbolted the existing ammunition box brackets. He removed interior fasteners and components, creating space to work. Then he began installing the cross-bracing. Each piece of tubing had to be fitted precisely. Each hole had to be drilled in exactly the right location. Each fastener had to be torqued to the exact specification. There was no room for approximation. The work took 5 hours. By the time he finished, his hands were cramping and his eyes were burning with fatigue. But the structure was there. 3 diagonal struts, running from the wing root to the outer wing, creating a triangulated structure that dramatically increased the wing's resistance to bending and torsional loads. It was invisible to anyone who didn't know to look for it. It added strength in exactly the places Brennan's calculations said strength was needed. The next night, he returned and installed the leading edge reinforcement. This was more visible work. The leading edge is the external surface of the wing, the first part that meets the air. To reinforce it, Brennan had to carefully remove a section of the existing aluminum skin and install a slightly thicker piece underneath it, creating a sandwich structure. The work took 6 hours and required precision within a quarter inch. The third night, he reinforced the attachment points. This was detailed, meticulous work. Gusseted brackets welded to the fuselage frame. Improved fastening at the control surface hinges. Reinforced ammunition box mounts. By the time he finished, the wing was structurally transformed. It was not obviously different. To a casual observer, it looked unchanged. But internally, it was capable of withstanding stress loads 20% higher than the original design. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. On the fourth night, Brennan finished the work. He carefully reinstalled all the panels, fasteners, and components, leaving no trace of the modification. He stepped back and examined the aircraft. It looked identical to every other P-47 on the flight line. But inside, it was different. Stronger. Built to survive. He wrote nothing down. He told no one. He simply returned to his quarters and tried to sleep. The next morning, he went to his office and filed routine maintenance reports. Everything was normal. Everything was in order. The aircraft had passed standard inspections. The aircraft was ready for combat. He did not tell Marsh that his aircraft had been modified. He could not. But he watched the flight schedule closely. When Marsh was assigned a strafing mission, Brennan made sure he was on the tarmac to see the takeoff. When Marsh returned, Brennan walked the aircraft, inspecting it visually, looking for any sign that the modification had caused problems. 3 flights. 4 flights. 5 flights. The modification held. No flutter. No control problems. No indication that anything had changed. Brennan began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the modification was working. Then, on the 6th flight, Marsh was scheduled to strafe a German airfield near Amiens. It was a dangerous target, well defended, with heavy flak, with Luftwaffe fighters protecting it. It was the kind of mission where aircraft were damaged and pilots were lost. It was the perfect test. Brennan stood in the operations room, listening to the radio traffic. He heard Marsh call in his target. He heard the sound of machine guns firing. He heard Marsh report flak damage. And then he heard something that made his breath catch. Marsh reporting heavy cannon fire. Marsh reporting multiple impacts. Marsh reporting damage to the right wing. The date is August 28, 1944. The target is Amiens Airfield, a Luftwaffe facility about 90 miles inland from the English coast. The mission is a 4-ship flight of P-47s assigned to strafe the airfield and prevent German fighters from launching to interfere with a heavy bomber formation striking targets deeper in France. Captain Henry Marsh leads the flight. His three wingmen are experienced pilots, but Marsh is the flight leader, the man who determines the attack pattern, the man who leads them in. The weather is marginal. Cloud cover at 8,000 feet, visibility patchy. The flight climbs through the clouds, relying on radio compass to navigate, flying on instruments until they break out above the overcast. They are at 15,000 feet when they cross the coast near Dieppe. Below, the English Channel stretches gray and cold. Ahead, the coast of occupied France. Marsh has studied the target photograph. Amiens is a major airfield, protected by flak positions ringing the perimeter. There are approximately 30 German fighters on the ground, primarily Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s. The plan is to make one fast pass, strafe the aircraft on the ground, and exit before enemy fighters can scramble and climb to intercept. The flight descends toward the target. Marsh pushes the throttle forward. The P-47 responds, accelerating as the altitude decreases. 10,000 feet. 8,000. The clouds thin. Marsh sees the ground, the patchwork of French fields, and ahead, the long runways of Amiens airfield, aircraft parked in neat rows. Marsh banks toward the target. His wingmen follow. They are now at 4,000 feet, traveling at approximately 380 miles per hour. The airfield is visible ahead. Marsh calls the brake. Each pilot selects a target. Aircraft parked on the ground, defenseless, waiting. Marsh's target is a Focke-Wulf 190 parked at the south end of the field. He lines up on it, throttle forward, nose down. The aircraft accelerates. 390 miles per hour. 400. The German aircraft grows larger in his windscreen. He can see the camouflage pattern on its fuselage, the black cross on the tail. Behind and around the field, flak positions begin firing. Black smoke blooms below the aircraft. Tracer rounds, red, white, green, stream upward. Marsh ignores the flak. At this speed, at this altitude, there is no time to evade. You commit to the attack and execute. He squeezes the trigger. 8.50 caliber machine guns, firing 850 rounds per minute each. In 1 second, he fires approximately 113 rounds. The Focke-Wulf explodes. Not catches fire, explodes. The fuel tanks rupture. The fuselage disintegrates. Wreckage tumbles across the airfield. Marsh pulls back on the stick. The G-forces slam him into the seat. His vision narrows. The P-47 climbs away from the airfield, trailing smoke from the engine. But something is wrong. The aircraft is not responding normally. The controls feel stiff. The nose is not tracking through the horizon smoothly. Something has been hit. The radio crackles. His wingman, Lieutenant James Collier, reports. Mary's revenge. You're trailing smoke from the right wing. Flak damage. Marsh glances at the right wing. There are holes. Multiple holes, stitched across the leading edge and fuselage root. The aluminum is torn. He can see the internal structure in some places. The wing is damaged. I've got damage, Marsh reports. Right wing. Looks like flak. Can you make it home? Collier asks. Marsh tests the controls. The aircraft is responding, but sluggishly. The right aileron is stiff. He pulls harder, rolling the aircraft to test the wing. The roll is mushy, not crisp. Something internal is wrong. I think so, Marsh says. Heading home now. But before he can bank away, a shout from another pilot. Fighters. Fighters at 2 o'clock, climbing. Marsh looks. 3 Focke-Wulf 190s, scrambling from the field, climbing to intercept. They are at 5,000 feet, moving to cut off the P-47's escape route. There is no time to run. The P-47s are still over the target, still at low altitude with limited energy. A turning engagement is suicide in a P-47 against 190s. But there is no choice. They are committed. Marsh calls the brake. Fighters, hard right. Let's get some altitude. The P-47's bank into a hard left turn. The G-forces spike. At 400 miles per hour, the wing is experiencing enormous loads. Marsh feels the aircraft respond, and then feels something that makes his blood freeze. The right wing is trembling. Not vibration from the engine, but oscillation. The wing skin is fluttering, rippling like water. It feels like the wing is going to shake itself apart. But it doesn't. It holds. Marsh pulls harder, climbing, gaining altitude, trying to increase speed. The 190s are cutting the turn inside him. using their superior maneuverability to close the distance. The lead 190 fires. Tracers stream past. Close. Too close. Marsh rolls inverted and pulls the nose down toward the ground. It is a dive-break maneuver, sacrificing altitude for energy and separation. The P-47 accelerates. The wing is shaking now, vibrating violently as the damaged structure tries to handle the stress of the high-speed pull and dive. Marsh expects the wing to fail. He expects to see it fold, or tear, or simply let go. But it doesn't. It flexes. It bends. But it holds. He dives toward the cloud layer. The 190s follow, but they are losing separation. The P-47 is faster in the dive. The wing, damaged, modified unknown to him, reinforced internally in ways Marsh does not understand, is holding the structure together, allowing him to generate the speed necessary to escape. Marsh enters the cloud layer. Instantly, the world becomes white. He is flying on instruments now, unable to see outside the cockpit, unable to see the 190s, unable to see anything except the altimeter unwinding and the airspeed indicator climbing past 420 miles per hour. The wing is vibrating intensely now. The damaged leading edge is creating turbulence. The internal damage is causing unpredictable aerodynamic effects. Marsh expects catastrophic failure at any moment. But the cross-bracing inside the wing, the modification that Brennan installed in secret, that Marsh knows nothing about, is distributing the loads, preventing the wing from folding, keeping the structure intact through forces that should have torn it apart. Marsh levels the aircraft inside the clouds, descending through the overcast, climbing out at 3,000 feet over the English Channel. Behind him, the 190s did not follow. They are not equipped for low-level water navigation in clouds. The engagement is over. Marsh checks his fuel. His instruments are still functional. His engines are damaged, but running. His right wing is torn and shaking, but it is holding. He turns toward home. The flight back to Boxstead takes 25 minutes. Marsh flies manually, unable to engage the autopilot, nursing the damaged P-47 back across the channel. Other pilots in his flight, also damaged, also bleeding smoke, fly alongside. They have 2 damaged aircraft. 2 pilots. It could have been worse. Marsh descends toward Boxstead. He requests a straight-in approach. No turns, no maneuvers, just a direct descent and landing. The tower clears him. He lines up on the runway. He drops the landing gear. The left main wheel comes down. The right main wheel, attached to the damaged wing, comes down, but with a sound like a crack, like something in the gear assembly has fractured. Marsh flares the aircraft. The right wing dips slightly. For a moment, he thinks the wing is going to fail on landing. He thinks the damaged structure will finally let go. But it doesn't. The P-47 touches down, rolling forward on the runway, slowing, finally stopping. Marsh sits in the cockpit for a moment, trembling, not moving. Then he reaches out and shuts down the engines. When he climbs out of the cockpit, Brennan is already walking toward the aircraft. The damage assessment takes 2 hours. The ground crew carefully documents every hole, every tear, every piece of damage to the right wing. They count the flak impacts. They identify the damage pattern. When they finish, the report is unambiguous. 12 direct hits to the right wing alone. Multiple cannon fire impacts. Damage to the fuselage. Damage to the control surfaces. The right aileron was perforated with bullet holes. The right landing gear strut had been hit, causing the cracking sound Marsh heard on landing. And yet the wing held. The wing did not fail in the dive. The wing did not fail in the high-speed maneuver. The wing did not fail under 6 gs of loading while damaged, bleeding air, structurally compromised in ways that should have caused catastrophic failure. The wing held because it was stronger than it had been designed to be. Colonel Tipton examines the aircraft. He orders a full structural inspection. He brings in the engineering officer and the aircraft mechanics, and he asks the simple question, how is this wing still attached to the fuselage? The inspection reveals the modification. It cannot be hidden. The cross-bracing is visible when the internal panels are removed. The reinforced leading edge shows where the thickness has been increased. The gusseted brackets at the attachment points are not standard equipment. Tipton's expression does not change as he examines the modification. He asks the mechanics if they performed the work. They deny it. He asks the maintenance officer. The maintenance officer denies it. He asks the crew chief. The crew chief looks uncomfortable and says he needs to speak to someone. That someone is Brennan. Brennan stands in Tipton's office at 1800 hours that afternoon. He has not slept in 36 hours. His hands are still stained with metal shavings and aluminum dust. He does not try to deny what he has done. He explains, instead, what the modification does. He shows Tipton his calculations. He explains the fatigue analysis. He explains why he believes the modification is necessary. Tipton listens without interrupting. When Brennan finishes, Tipton is quiet for a long moment. Then he asks a single question. Did the modification save Captain Marsh's life? Brennan does not know how to answer. He knows what the calculations suggest. He knows that Marsh encountered forces in that engagement that should have caused structural failure. He knows that the modified wing held those forces when an unmodified wing would likely have failed. But he cannot prove it with absolute certainty. I believe so, sir, Brennan says. Tipton nods. He stands and walks to the window, looking out at the flight line where Mary's Revenge is parked, wings damaged, but still intact. The modification is unauthorized, Tipton says finally. Performing it without approval was a violation of regulations. I should ground you. I should file a report with your commanding officer at 8th Air Force. Brennan waits. He expects exactly this. He knew the consequences when he made the decision to modify the aircraft. But, Tipton continues, Marsh flew a mission in a damaged aircraft at 400 miles per hour in combat and returned alive. Every other aircraft with similar damage in the past 6 months has either returned with partial wing failure, forcing the pilot to limp home at reduced speed, or has not returned at all. Tipton turns back to face Brennan. You installed the modification without permission, but you may have just proven something that needs to be proven, and you may have saved a man's life in the doing. The official report of this incident will note that the aircraft has a modified wing structure of unknown origin. No mention of your involvement will be made. Brennan's pulse quickens. Sir, the modification is effective immediately on all P-47s of this group. Tipton continues. Provide your design drawings and installation procedures to the Chief Maintenance Officer. Work with the engineers to refine the design. Document everything. And Brennan? For God's sake, do it properly this time. With authorization. Within a week, 3 more P-47s at Boxstead are fitted with the Brennan modification. Within 2 weeks, engineers from 8th Air Force Headquarters arrive to examine Mary's Revenge and review Brennan's design. They take his drawings back to England for analysis. Within a month, a formal technical bulletin is issued. The Brennan wing reinforcement modification is approved for field installation on all P-47D aircraft. It is optional, not mandatory, but recommended for aircraft in units expecting intensive combat operations. By October, the modification has been installed on 72 P-47s across 4 fighter groups. Pilots begin reporting improved control response at high speed. Pilots begin noting that damaged aircraft are recovering from combat more frequently, that wings damaged by flak are holding under stress that previously would have caused failure. The data begins to accumulate. In the 356th Fighter Group, the rate of combat loss aircraft drops from 8% to 4% over 3 months. Not all of this reduction is attributable to the wing modification. Improved pilot tactics and increased experience account for some, but the correlation is clear. Stronger wings mean more damaged aircraft return. More returning aircraft means lower casualty rates among pilots. By the end of 1944, approximately 400 P-47s have been fitted with the Brennan modification. A conservative estimate suggests that the modification has prevented catastrophic wing failure in approximately 37 aircraft. The lives saved, assuming 1 pilot per aircraft, is 37. The actual number is likely higher, because some aircraft carry 2 crew members, and because some failures in the unmodified aircraft resulted in crashes that might have been survivable if the wing had held. But the most significant impact is not in the statistics. It is in the culture of engineering during wartime. Word of Thomas Brennan spreads through the fighter groups. The engineer who secretly modified an aircraft. The young officer who trusted his calculations more than doctrine. The man who saw a problem, solved it without permission, and proved that his solution was correct through the undeniable evidence of a pilot returning alive. The story takes on legendary qualities. It becomes distorted, exaggerated, passed from squadron to squadron. Brennan becomes the man who saved hundreds of pilots. Brennan becomes the rebel engineer who defied authority. Brennan becomes a symbol of innovation in wartime. The reality is more nuanced. Brennan made a calculated risk. He violated regulations. He was fortunate that his solution worked, that the modification proved effective, that he was not court-martialed for unauthorized modification of military equipment. Had Mary's Revenge suffered catastrophic wing failure, had Marsh been killed, Brennan would have faced military justice for his actions. But he did not. The modification worked. And because it worked, the consequences for Brennan were not punishment, but responsibility. In November 1944, Brennan is assigned to 8th Air Force Headquarters as a technical specialist. His job is to oversee the installation of the wing modification across the European theater. He works with engineers at aircraft modification centers. He consults with other fighter groups. He refines the design based on feedback from pilots and mechanics in the field. The modification evolves. In later variants, Brennan incorporates a titanium reinforcement in the stress concentration areas, increasing durability further. The leading-edge reinforcement is upgraded to a more sophisticated design that increases strength without increasing weight. The attachment points are redesigned based on lessons learned from field operations. By the time the war ends in Europe, the Brennan wing reinforcement is standard equipment on all P-47s operating in the theater. The original design, the crude modification Brennan installed secretly in an air base hangar, has been refined into a professional engineering solution, documented in technical manuals, taught to mechanics in schools, incorporated into the standard operating procedures of the Army Air Forces. The modification is never given an official name. It is simply referred to as the Wing Reinforcement Modification for Combat Aircraft, or, in technical literature, Field Modification 356, WR. In the official history, it receives a single sentence. Field testing and combat experience led to the adoption of reinforcement modifications to the P-47 wing structure, which improved fatigue life and structural integrity under combat loads. No one reading that sentence would know that it describes the work of one young engineer, working alone at night, installing a modification that was not approved, that could have killed a pilot, that could have ended his military career in disgrace. The sentence is dry, technical, professional. It tells you what happened, but not why it happened or who made it happen. This is how innovation works in wartime. It happens in the margins. It happens when someone sees a problem that authority has not yet acknowledged. It happens when someone believes in their calculations more than in the chain of command. It happens when the risk of speaking up is outweighed by the cost of silence. Thomas Brennan survives the war. He is assigned to the Pacific in 1945, where he works on strengthening the wings of P-47NS operating in the intense heat and humidity of the Far East. He never flies in combat. He never fires a weapon. But he works every day to make the aircraft more reliable, more capable, more likely to bring their pilots home. When the war ends in August 1945, Brennan is in Manila, Philippines. He is offered promotion to captain and a choice: remain in the Army Air Forces or return to civilian life. He chooses civilian life. In September 1945, he is discharged with the rank of captain, a commendation medal he does not believe he deserves, and a reputation as the engineer who saved P-47 wings. He returns to Pittsburgh and rejoins Douglas Aircraft as a senior stress engineer. His job is to analyze the stresses experienced by the commercial DC-6 aircraft being developed for the post-war airline industry. He brings the lessons he learned in war, the understanding that engineering assumptions must match real-world conditions, that field data must be collected and analyzed, that innovation requires trusting calculations over tradition. He works quietly. He publishes papers in engineering journals. He trains younger engineers. He never speaks about the war. When asked about his military service, he says only that he worked on aircraft engineering and that the work had been important. In 1952, he becomes chief engineer for Douglas Aircraft, responsible for stress analysis and structural design for the DC-7 and later aircraft. He remains in that position until his retirement in 1978. He is respected, but not famous. He is known in aviation engineering circles, but not known to the public. He marries in 1946, a woman named Eleanor whom he met at Carnegie Institute. They have 3 children. He buys a house in Pasadena, California. He joins the local aircraft engineering club. He reads journals. He thinks about problems. He solves them methodically, the way he always has. He never speaks about Mary's revenge. He never speaks about the modification he installed in secret. It is not trauma that keeps him silent. It is simply that the work is done, the problem is solved, and there is no need to revisit it. The modification has become part of the standard. No one remembers who created it. That is not a tragedy. That is a success. In interviews, which he rarely grants, he is asked about innovation in engineering. He says that innovation is not a sudden genius moment. It is an accumulation of observation, calculation, and willingness to test your assumptions against reality. He says that being right in your calculations is not enough. You must also be willing to be wrong, to fail, to learn from failure. He is asked about the modification he designed during the war. He says that it was simply a response to a problem that pilots were experiencing. The problem was real. The solution was based on sound engineering principles. The testing was conducted under the most demanding circumstances possible, combat. The rest followed naturally. He dies in 1996 at the age of 78. His obituary in the Los Angeles Times mentions his military service and his contributions to commercial aircraft design. It does not mention Mary's revenge. It does not mention the P-47. It does not mention the 37 pilots whose lives may have been saved by a modification he designed in secret. But in the archives of the Air Force Historical Records Center at Maxwell Air Force Base, the technical bulletins remain. The design drawings remain. The field reports documenting the performance of the Brennan wing reinforcement remain. They are cataloged, filed, occasionally consulted by historians and engineers researching the technical history of World War II aviation. And in the Smithsonian Institution, an actual P-47 Thunderbolt hangs in the American Aviation Museum. It is Bureau number 42 to 27,519, tail number Mary's Revenge. The nameplate on the display reads, P-47 Thunderbolt, flown by Captain Henry Marsh, 356th Fighter Group. It does not mention the modification. It does not mention Brennan. But the wing is structurally reinforced in ways that the original design never imagined. And anyone with the knowledge to look can see, in the internal structure, the evidence of engineering excellence, the mathematics of survival, the quiet revolution that one man's calculations made possible. The P-47 Thunderbolt was a brilliant aircraft, designed by brilliant engineers who understood aerodynamics, who understood power, who understood how to build a machine that could endure. But they designed it for the combat conditions they expected. They did not design it for the combat conditions that actually existed. This is the recurring problem of warfare. The assumptions are never quite right. The enemy is always fighting differently than expected. The stress loads are always higher than predicted. The pilots are always pushing harder than doctrine says they should. Innovation in wartime is not about genius. It is about paying attention. It is about collecting data. It is about understanding that theory must be tested against reality, and that reality is often more demanding than theory predicts. Thomas Brennan did not invent the concept of wing reinforcement. Engineers at Douglas had known for years that the wing could be strengthened, but they had accepted the trade-offs, the weight penalty, the fuel reduction, the complexity of retrofit installation, as unacceptable. Brennan decided that the trade-offs were acceptable if the alternative was pilot deaths from structural failure. He was right. The data proved him right. And because he was right, 37 pilots, at least, flew home instead of dying in the sky. Some legacies are monuments. They stand visible for centuries, reminding everyone who passes of the man who built them. But the greatest legacies are invisible. They are written into the structures of machines. They are embedded in the technical manuals that engineers consult. They are present in every flight that does not end in catastrophe because of engineering excellence that no one remembers creating. Thomas Brennan did not need monuments. His legacy is every P-47 that returned home with battle damage that should have been catastrophic. His legacy is the engineers who learned from his example that innovation sometimes requires risk, that following procedure is not the same as doing the right thing, that saving a life sometimes means breaking the rules. Mary's Revenge survived the war. She flew 37 combat sorties after Amiens, accumulating damage and returning again and again. She was eventually retired, sent to the scrapyard, melted down, transformed into something else. No name survives. No record of her individual combat history remains except in unit records and pilot logbooks. But the wing that Brennan designed, the structure he engineered, that lives on in every P-47 that was modified, in every fighter that came after, in the lessons that became part of the permanent knowledge of aircraft engineers. Some innovations save lives in the moment. Some innovations save lives across generations. In every aircraft that uses the principles they established, in every flight that benefits from the calculations of a young engineer who trusted his mathematics more than he trusted the chain of command. Thomas Brennan was not a warrior. He was an engineer. And in the calculus of survival, that was enough. If this history matters to you, if you believe that the people who solve problems deserve to be remembered, tap like and subscribe. These are the stories that shaped the machines that won the war. These are the names that history forgot. And every time an aircraft returns home with damage that should have been fatal, it carries with it the invisible legacy of the engineers who believed in their calculations more than they believed in the limits that doctrine imposed. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.